You are all by now familiar with the brutality and the dastardly manner in which 26 innocent lives were prematurely terminated at Pahalgam on the 22nd of April. When you combine those horrific scenes and the pain of the families that the nation witnessed with numerous other recent terrorist strikes on our armed forces and defenseless civilians, we knew that the time had arrived to make yet another compelling statement of our resolve as a nation. Operation Sindur was conceptualized with a clear military aim to punish the perpetrators and planners of terror and to destroy their terror infrastructure. What I do not state here, of course, is the often stated determination of India and its intolerance to terror. It set into motion a very diligent and microscopic scarring of the terror landscape across the borders and the identification of terror camps and training sites. The locations that emerged were numerous, but as we deliberated more, we realized that some of these terror hubs were now bereft of any presence and had preemptively been vacated, fearing retribution from us. There was also a term of reference and our own binding, self-imposed restriction to target only terrorists and thus prevent collateral damage. There were 9 camps that you are now all familiar with, which were confirmed by our various intelligence agencies to be inhabited. Some of these were in POJK, while there were others that were located in the Punjab province in Pakistan. Nefarious places such as Muridke, the hub center of the Lashkar-e-Taiba, has over the years bred infamous characters such as Ajmal Kasab and the likes of David Headley. What followed was a careful scrutiny of each of these sinister locations, their layout, configuration, even the type of construction in each structure, and the terrain obtained around these. This was with an obvious intent to deduce and identify the exact vector that was required for their neutralization, as also the eyes in the sky that we would send up to ensure that we brought back evidence that we had indeed targeted what we set out to. The precise images of these engagements on that fateful and historical night have already been showcased during the first press statement on the 7th of May that was helmed by our Foreign Secretary. I have no doubt in my mind that we achieved total surprise, and those strikes across those 9 terror hubs left more than 100 terrorists killed, including high-value targets such as Yusuf Azhar, Abdul Malik Rauf, and Mudassir Ahmed that were involved in the hijack of IC-814 and the Pulwama blast. The line of control was also violated soon after by Pakistan, and the erratic and rattled response of our enemy was apparent from the number of civilians, inhabited villages, and religious sites such as Gurudwaras that were unfortunately hit by them, leading to a sad loss of lives. The Indian Air Force played a major part in these strikes by engaging some of these camps, and the Indian Navy provided wherewithal in terms of precision munitions. The Indian Air Force obviously had their assets up in the sky, and I will here request Air Marshal Bharti, the Director General of Air Operations, to detail for you the methodology that the men in blue adopted to successfully manifest this mission. Thank you, Air Marshal Bharti. So, ladies and gentlemen, he's outlined operations not only on the night of 6th and 7th of May, when Operation Sindur commenced, but also on the subsequent night. Being well aware and familiar with the congenital and impulsive nature of our adversary, and even though we did attempt to reach out and communicate our compulsions to strike at the heart of terror to my counterpart in the immediate wake of Operation Sindur, the request was brusquely turned down, with an intimation that a severe response was inevitable and in the offing. We were, of course, prepared. Operations on the 7th and the 8th, Air Marshal Bharti spoken about. On the night of 8th and 9th of May, they flew drones and aircrafts into our airspace all across the borders and made largely unsuccessful attempts to target numerous military infrastructure. Violations on the line of control by Pakistan also commenced yet again and precipitated into fierce arty engagements. The air operations on the night of 8th and 9th of May, I'll yet again request the DG Air Operations to cover. On land, we also undertook certain measures such as deployment of air defense and electronic warfare assets to establish an integrated grid with the Indian Air Force, and I have seen and heard some of you wax eloquent about the benefits of such an architecture when it comes to negating and combating air intrusions. We also carried out deployment to include movement of our forces in the land, sea, and air domains. The night of the 9th and the 10th of May saw similar intrusions by drones and aircrafts, and this time there was a concerted effort to target airfields and some very, very important logistic installations, albeit yet again unsuccessful and denied gallantly and efficiently, I must say, by the integrated Indian Air Force and Indian Army Air Defense. We further strengthened our deployment and also initiated some pressure points to send a very clear and unambiguous message to the other side to desist from any misadventures on land. Some of the airfields and dumps saw repeated attacks in waves from the air. All were thwarted. The Pakistan Army has reported to have lost approximately 35 to 40 personnel in artillery and small arms firing on the line of control between the 7th and the 10th of May. What the other side had probably also not reckoned with was the speedy and precise turnaround and hit back by the Indian Air Force. And I will yet again ask Air Marshal Bharti to speak about these significant and game-changing strikes. I will thereafter request Vice Admiral Pramod, my colleague and Director General of Naval Operations, to tell us about some very telling naval maneuvers in the Arabian Sea that exerted pressure on the night of 9th and 10th of May. Ladies and gentlemen, on the 10th of May, in the morning, even as we were getting into a huddle to wargame the events of the previous night, a routine exercise, I received a message on hotline from my counterpart in Pakistan seeking my willingness to communicate. Since our initial aim was to strike at terror camps, and all our actions in the subsequent days were in response to the intrusions and violations by the Pakistan Air Force and its army, it was decided that I would indeed speak with my counterpart. You are already aware, I've seen it being covered on national television, that my communication with the Pak DGMO was conducted at 15:35 hours yesterday and resulted in cessation of cross-border firing and air intrusions by either side with effect from 1700 hours, 10th of May, after he proposed that we cease hostilities. We also decided to further speak on the 12th of May, that's tomorrow, at 1200 hours, to discuss the modalities that would enable the longevity of this understanding. However, disappointingly, and must I add, expectedly, it took only a couple of hours for the Pakistan Army to violate these arrangements by cross-border and across the line of control firing, followed by drone intrusions across the expanse of the Western Front through last night and in the early hours of the morning today. These violations were responded to robustly and dealt with as they must be. We have earlier today sent another hotline message to my counterpart highlighting these violations of the understanding between the DGMOs on the 10th of May and our firm and clear intent to respond to these fiercely and punitively, if repeated tonight, subsequently, or later. In this regard, I must inform all of you that the Chief of Army Staff has earlier today conducted a security review and has granted full authority to our Army commanders for counter-actions in the kinetic domain in case of any violation by Pakistan. In the end, I pay my solemn homage to my 5 fallen colleagues and brothers from the armed forces and civilians who have tragically lost their lives in Operation Sindur. Our hearts go out to the bereaved families, and we express our solidarity to them in this lifetime and beyond, at this grave juncture in their lives. Their sacrifices shall always be remembered and spoken of in glowing terms by a grateful nation. We have thus far, ladies and gentlemen, exercised, and my colleague Pramod highlighted this, immense restraint, and our actions have been focused, measured, and non-escalatory. However, any threat to the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and safety of our citizens will be met with decisive force. Jai Hind.